Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 326 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on why do we celebrate a Pride Month? And it is Wednesday, the 4th of June 2025 as I record this. So today's podcast episode is a lot of fun because I often hear from people that they don't understand why do we celebrate Pride Month, because surely LGBT plus people, they have equal rights. They're allowed to get married and legally they're protected against hate crimes, discrimination, etc. And whilst this is true in liberal countries, this is not a universal truth, and then there are lots of different reasons why we celebrate a Pride Month. Because ultimately, Pride is a protest because of these equal laws have actually been passed, it does mean that the transphobia, the homophobia, the biphobia has disappeared, and the loss of LGBT plus people we need to be constantly vigilant about whether we're going to be abused, hated on, or beaten up, even in liberal countries. And in 71 countries all over the world, it's still illegal to be LGBT plus. So there are lots of really good reasons why we need to continue to celebrate Pride Month. And that's something that we explore in today's episode. And it's really a good way to actually start Pride season on the Psychology World podcast. So you got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. And as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and opinions on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment on the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast or tweet me on Twitter at Sci-Fi Wiley, or leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn post. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And please send the pictures of where you're listening in from all over the world. I love to see where you're listening from. And today's podcast episode has been sponsored by Social Psychology, a guide to social and cultural psychology. So the reason why this is a brilliant sponsor for today's episode is because this great, really easy to understand book goes into a lot of the depth about social psychology. So how do our social groups and our social identities impact our behaviour? So not only does this look at your typical in-groups, out-groups, but it also looks at other concepts like persuasion, how do we learn from others, and the wide range of different impact that our social groups can actually have on us. And the reason why I chose this to be the sponsor of today's episode is because social psychology helps us to explain why people discriminated against, why do hate crimes happen, and so many other concepts that are absolutely critical to this podcast episode. So if you want to learn more, then I highly recommend just checking out this great, really accessible book. So that is Social Psychology, a guide to social and cultural psychology, available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore or local library if you request it. And if you want the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence, then you can get it at selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble, and selected library systems like Biblioteca, Overdrive, and Baker & Taylor. So, whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. If you want access to tons of great rewards, including podcast episodes that won't be turned and made available to the public for weeks, months, or even years into the future, and if you want a closer relationship between me as the podcast creator and you as the listener, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then please head on over to buymeacoffee.com/Con Whiteley. So that's enough of this introductory matter. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about why do we celebrate Pride Month. It's a really fun and really insightful podcast episode that I flat out loved. So I know that you're going to enjoy it. So let's dive into it. Why do we celebrate Pride Month? So thankfully there are a lot of countries in the world where LGBT plus people can have equal legal rights, so they are protected by law against discrimination and hate crime, as well as there are some wonderful countries that allow LGBT plus couples to get married, have children and adopt children, just like their heterosexual peers. Yet, just because we have these legal rights, it doesn't mean that the homophobia, transphobia, and biphobia has disappeared. This is even more important when we think about the anti-LGBT plus laws that are being filed and are passing in legislate around the world, in particular Hungary and the United States. Even within the United Kingdom, where on the surface it seems to be a perfectly safe country to be LGBT plus, the reality is very different. And this is before I think about my own child abuse, the intense homophobia that I experienced, and maybe in fear for my life every day of my adolescence. Since a report from Gallup found that 64% of LGBT plus people experience anti-LGBT plus violence and abuse, as well as 90% of the respondents to the survey that they were negatively impacted by this anti-LGBT plus abuse. Personally, I completely understand this because whenever I experience anti-LGBT plus abuse, it makes me feel like a rubbish, like I'm less than a human, and it only negatively impacts my mental health. It can increase my anxiety and depressive symptoms because there are times when I'm unsure of whether I'm safe, or if I'll be abused or hated on, if I even look or act slightly gay. If the United Kingdom is really a safer country for LGBT plus people, then this would not happen. The findings of this report are even worse when we look at the finding that 45% of the respondents said that they required emotional support. Now, there will be those in a society that will argue that surely this just shows that the LGBT plus community are just a bunch of snowflakes, but they are not. This finding just goes to show that the discrimination, the homophobia, and the hate that we experience just because of who we are causes us significant levels of distress and mental health difficulties that we require support. And as I always say, regardless of who you are, it shows more bravery and courage than you will ever know to admit that you need professional support and you seek it out. Speaking of professional support, a report from Stonewall found that 13% of LGBT plus people experience healthcare inequalities because of their sexual orientation. In my own research on transgender mental health, this is a common theme that I see in the narratives of my own participants, and Stonewall also found that 70% of the transgender population worry about healthcare discrimination when accessing general health services. This is wrong on so many levels. It is disgusting and outrageous that there is a minority of healthcare professionals that discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation. This shouldn't happen, and it just goes to show that even in countries with equal rights for LGBT plus people, there is still a long way to go until we reach true equality. In addition, this is a mental health crisis that is only getting worse, because a report from the charity Just Like Us found that 68% of LGBT plus young people said their mental health has decreased since the COVID-19 pandemic, compared to only half of non-LGBT plus people. This again shows how mental health of LGBT plus youth needs to be protected and focused on, because unless government and mental health services address the underlying reasons for these mental health disparities, things will only continue to get worse for the community. Moreover, this lack of true equal rights doesn't just extend to a general society and our healthcare settings, it applies to our schools as well. Since in our schools, 42% of LGBT plus students have been bullied, and you might argue that bullying is just a part of the school experience, and LGBT plus students are different, so of course they're going to be bullied. This is flat out wrong, because no one should ever be bullied because of who they are, who they love, and especially because the number of LGBT plus students bullied compared to non-LGBT plus students is doubled. This is discrimination, not because bullying is a part of the school experience, which it never should be in the first place. Another facet of this argument about the importance of a Pride Month is that this is not just a problem for the UK. Other liberal countries like France, Australia, and Germany all have a similar finding, as well as there are other liberal countries that are trying to become less liberal, like the United States, with their en masse anti-trans and anti-LGBT plus laws that are sweeping the federal and state government, as well as Florida's Don't Say Gay bill, is the most famous example. Unfortunately, this is just history repeating itself, because the UK used to have the disgusting Section 28 under Thatcher's government. Section 28 made it illegal, just like the Don't Say Gay bill, by greatly restricting the ability for schools to teach students about gender issues and sexual orientation. We know in the United Kingdom is that Section 28 caused a lot of harm to the LGBT plus community, and it impacts innocent lives today. There's a lot of LGBT plus people still have the unfortunate and heartbreaking core belief that they are not good enough and they are worthless. This is why these laws, like Section 28, are wrong, and they do not do what they are designed to do. These laws never should have existed in the first place. The Conservatives suggest that these laws argue that anti-LGBT plus laws protect children and they protect society, yet they do not, because they harm children, the LGBT plus community, and society as a whole. These laws are designed to induce shame and have an immensely negative impact on people's mental health and quality of life. How does this protect anyone? Ultimately, whether you want to admit it or not, being LGBT plus in this modern world is not easy, and unfortunately, an everyday part of the life of an LGBT plus person is being constantly vigilant in this inhospitable world because of our expectations to be discriminated against and have to deal with the negative consequences. For example, heterosexual couples that don't have to think about whether it's safe to simply hold your partner's hand in public, and heterosexual couples don't have to think about holding hands will get them abused, hated on, or beaten up. LGBT plus couples have to think about this constantly. The importance of pride events because of chosen family. It doesn't matter if you live in a liberal country or not. There are always stories of innocent and amazing LGBT plus people being disowned by their loved ones and being thrown out of their homes. This happens even in the United Kingdom, and this was one of my biggest fears growing up, and it really impacted my mental health negatively. As a result, pride events allow LGBT plus people who have been rejected by their families to find their tribe or chosen a family. This might sound really easy, but it is not. It can even be a challenge for LGBT plus people to allow ourselves to be loved by a family of a choice, because sadly they might not believe that they're worthy of receiving love. Thankfully, it is possible to learn to love ourselves, even if it is an ongoing process. Personally, I never ever believed that I was likable or even lovable because of the intensely homophobic abuse and messages I had internalized over the years. My entire life, I had been taught and told that I was wrong, I was disgusting, and I was an abomination for being gay. So I never learned that I was lovable. Honestly, it took me getting raped and having to heal and recover from sexual violence to understand that I'm lovable and amazing. How sad is that? It took me getting raped to undo all the intensely homophobic messages that I have been taught my entire life. Pride events remind us to love ourselves. Another reason why pride events are important is because they are a protest and a reminder that being LGBT plus means that we are entitled to love ourselves, just like everyone else. A lot of therapists who work with LGBT plus clients have to teach their clients how to love themselves. They're constantly experiencing negative self-talk and thoughts, saying that they aren't good enough, no one cares about them, and they will never find anyone who loves them. This is why it's important in therapy to encourage LGBT plus clients to argue against their bully, because no one, regardless of their sexual orientation, is worthless, unlovable, and they are just as good as anyone else. In addition, loving yourself gives you another valuable opportunity. It is the opportunity to rest and self-soothe and just slow down. And instead of constantly scanning your inner environment, threats, dangers, and any signs that you're about to be hated on and abused, you can simply slow down with a nice cup of tea, coffee, and a biscuit and just relax and self-soothe for a while. It's why I love reading, writing, with a massive mug of coffee with honey in it next to me. I get to enjoy myself for a moment and just know that I'm safe, loved, and I'm worthy of everything. Before I venture back out into the world where there are threats and dangers. Personally, whilst it took me getting raped to really understand how much love I deserve and how much of a brilliant person I am, I remembered the decades of hating myself, wanting to punish and self-harm. The homophobia made me believe that I was fundamentally wrong. I never should have had to go through that. This is why I practice self-care, and I make sure I enjoy the simple pleasures, and I focus on myself, making sure that I am okay, I am loved, and I am happy. I deserve it, and so do you. Finally, for this section, it's important to remember that LGBT plus people are not burdens to friends, and it's so important to have good, high quality connections with our chosen family and tribe. Our LGBT plus community is critical to our mental health and well-being. The importance of pride events is of global discrimination. So, heterosexual people can go anywhere in the world, and they don't have to worry about being arrested, beaten, whipped, or abused, LGBT plus people have to constantly worry and plan where they go based on their level of risk. At the moment, according to the Human Dignity Trust, there are 71 countries that have criminalised same-sex relationships, and 11 of these countries punish homosexuality by death. This is even worse when we can consider 25% of the world's population thinks that homosexuality should be a crime. Therefore, heterosexual couples can go to sunny beaches and destinations and enjoy everything that culture has to offer without thinking about the deadly dangers that country poses to LGBT plus people. Personally, I would flat out love to go to countries like Egypt, China, and other countries in the Middle East. These countries have such rich histories and fascinating cultures that I would love to learn more about. Yet at the moment, if I go to these countries, then there is a massive risk that I will be arrested, beaten, whipped, or killed. I don't want to go to a prison just because of who I love. Straight people never have to worry about this, so that's why pride events are needed, so we can protest this awful discriminatory treatment. Conclusion. This is why Pride Month is so appalling, and it's still needed after all these years. Pride events might look like parties, but they're not. In fact, Pride events are a protest, an act of defiance, because it shows the world that LGBT plus people are alive, visible, and they should be fully accepted in our society without fear of being discriminated against in the workplace, schools, shops, healthcare, and universities, and so many other places. And these days, Pride events are needed more than ever, as there are those in power and government and wider society that seek to erase us from everyday life. But we will always be around. LGBT plus people have been here since ancient times, and we will always be here. You can never erase us, and that's why Pride Month should be celebrated. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did, because even though I've always been a massive supporter of Pride Month, I've never actually looked into the other reasons about why Pride Month is so important and why it needs to be celebrated. So I learned a lot, and hopefully you did too. And if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when wonderful people help spread the words about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, then please check out Social Psychology, a guide to social and cultural psychology, available from all the usual places. And if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis, then please head on over to patreon.com/The Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Conor Whiteley. So, have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwhiteley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.